Um, it's an exciting opportunity for me. Looking at the book, I started reading this about 20 years ago. Uh, at the time, I just found this book. I don't know how I found it, but it was a very difficult book at that point in time. I couldn't take the way the book is written. It's all fragmented. It's all over the place. I'm sure everybody appreciates that. At the time, I was just out of college, trying to find some structure to my life, and having something which is structured was necessary. So I couldn't read that book. I stopped reading that book. A few weeks ago, I started reading it again for this event, and I went through the same emotions again. But this time around, I was able to catch on to it and see the different part of the book. And I feel that the brilliance and the gloominess of this book is in the way that it is written, the way the characters are developed in a fragmented manner. It makes me come to two opposing conclusions at the same time. All the characters in this book are based on real life people, and all of them are completely made up. I'm not able to come to any of the conclusion. I mean, I keep on swinging. Every time I read a different part of the book, I come to this conclusion again. It's not possible to make up such characters, obviously. But they cannot be made up and with such flawless precision. But such characters, can they exist in real life? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. And that's what the book does to me. It completely confuses me. It's a confusing book. That's why I don't like it. I just don't like the book. When it confuses me, I just hate it. While this book is developed on the backdrop of a war, I keep coming back to this again. Why did this author, maybe it was his life, where he went to war, came back and wrote about it. I can also see that it could easily be applied to real life, our life, now when we are in peacetime. One example that I'd like to quote from the book is the incident or exchange between Milo Minder Binder. That name itself is made up, I think. It cannot be a real name. I tried to look up on the internet. I couldn't find a real name like that. Anyway, he has an exchange with Major Major. That's another, concocted thing, I think. But it could be true. And when Major Major tells him that I should get the same food that all the other officers get, in spite of that instruction, Milo sends him exotic food with some lobster and some exotic salad. When he receives this food, when Major receives this food, he looks at it and feels that I should not be eating this, I should send this back. But again, he thinks about it and says, if I send this back, it'll probably go waste, or somebody else will eat it. And he also has a soft corner for broiled lobster, so eats it anyway. Next time he gets another set of food which is different from the other officers, he eats it anyway. So it becomes a habit, and he's okay with it after some time. All his righteousness of being equal with the other officers just fades away. This parallel comes to me when we see our real life. I find a parallel of this with the kind of corruption that we deal with in everyday life. At the beginning, when we see any kind of corruption that is happening, it could be a small thing like, paying somebody or receiving somebody from somebody for some effort that you have done. We avoid it the first time, we feel guilty the first few times, but after some time we keep on doing it and we don't feel guilty about it anymore. It's apparently the greater good prevails, and we say that if I do this, maybe a consequence of this will not be pleasant. So I keep on doing it. So I'd like to close this with saying, I want to recommend this book to my friends, colleagues, family, people I love, people I don't like. But, at the same time, I don't want to do that. It brings that kind of an emotion in me, the conflicting emotion in me, which I don't want my friends and colleagues and loved ones to go through. But at the same time, I don't want them to miss it. And that's the brilliance of the book, or that's the gloominess of the book. It subjects me to catch-22s all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit nervous because my first time. So after reading Catch-22 for the first time for this event, I was amazed, shocked, horrified, and even in wonder, how have I not discovered this book before? The topic is, I'm someone who loves learning about the different impacts of war, consequences. So the fact that this book was not seen for so long, like I've not discovered for so long. It's like, what else in life am I missing? Something that caught my eye when I read this book is that how we, as an audience, or even as anyone else, underestimates the actual impact of the war if we're not directly affected. Then a war, according to me, has three sides: the winner, the loser, and how, as we, as a reader, interpret the war. To me, Catch-22 is a situation where you cannot do one thing without doing the other, but to do the other thing, the one thing has to be done. Yosarian's story, it really touched me, because in the beginning of the book, he went from someone who just wanted to escape from fighting by making various excuses to being directly influenced by the war and personal tragedies, that he took a firm decision to not fight any longer. And when faced with the most difficult situation, he finds an alternative way out in a situation that actually seems improbable. I must confess that when I actually read the book the first time, the first half, I was not impressed by his character. I'm sorry about that. But when I got to the end, I had a full 360 degree about him, the view I saw of him. Because whereas he could have taken the easy way out, which would not have been fair to the other soldiers, he actually found a way that literally seemed impossible in that situation, and that really impressed me. And after reading this book, I got a deeper understanding, why did he do the situation in the first place? Why did he choose those excuses? And I felt really empathetic for him and what the other soldiers go through. I would definitely recommend this book to everybody I know, not only for the full 360 degree of emotions they would go through, but also for this work of art that the novel is. It's definitely a must-read. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I have read Catch-22 twice, once as a 16-year-old and once as a 23-year-old. Both times I found it irresistibly funny. Although the second time around, I realized there might be a point to all the pointless conversations within it. What stood out were its twisted characters and, quite frankly, absurd dialogue. If I met a real-life Yosarian, I don't know whether I would run towards him or away from him. Same goes for the chaplain, Doc Danica, and Quadruple Major. Although it has a cynical outlook and is set in a dark world, with an acerbic undercurrent running rampant through its pages, the book makes light of difficult times and strikes me as an example of how to make lemonade when life gives you lemons. At the end of the day, the protagonist's escape leaves you with a sense of solace and completion. To me, it is a literary masterpiece, a timeless tale of the futility of war and its impact on the sanity of those entrenched in its mire. The Catch-22 embedded within the premise of reading Catch-22 is, once you've read it, you'll never read something quite as good again.
Thank you so much to our gracious host. I think we've listened to a very interesting perspective on the book, and I think this is a very complex book, and as we were discussing about it in the backstage, it is a book which is very frightening to interpret as well, even though there is a very light side to it. And Heller's novel is not just about wartime in the military or the absurdity of war, especially for a reader like me. Though it's more popularly well known as an anti-war novel, because I come from Mizoram, which is always said to be the most peaceful state in India. So it's very difficult for me to relate to war setting and writings about war. But it's more relatable to me when I read it as an anti-bureaucratic novel. Something which is writing against the system, because not just during wartime, I think even in times when things look peaceful around us, our current social system is really a system designed for efficiency that has become inadequate and toxic. And I think this part of the novel, or this interpretation of the novel, is what I relate to the most. And many a times it's also about, the individual versus the system, especially when it comes to politics and administration. So it's where the negative, the alienating, the schizophrenic forces are now corrupting the system from the inside. And I think what is relevant here is the question of the enemy. And I just like to read an extract from the book in relation to what I've just talked about. It's in chapter 12 where Yosaran and Clevinger has a conversation. So he says, "We are talking about two different things," Yosaran answered with exaggerated weariness. "You are talking about the relationship of the Air Corps to the infantry, and I am talking about the relationship of me to Colonel Cathcart. What you are talking about winning the war, and I am talking about winning the war and keeping alive." "Exactly," Clevinger snapped smugly, "and which do you think is more important?" "To whom?" Yossarian shot back. "Open your eyes. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference who wins the war to someone who's dead." "The enemy," retorted Yossarian with weighted precision, "is anybody who's going to get you killed, no matter which side he's on, and that includes Colonel Cathcart. And don't you forget that, because the longer you remember it, the longer you might live." And I think this, the blurring of the line between the good and bad is what really strikes me when it comes to the book. And as one of the speakers have said before, I think the fragmentation of the narrative and of the characterization is also something which really reflects what we have in society today. But at the end, I think that, as one of the speakers have said, making light of difficult times is also exactly what we need in our time and age. And even though it's a very complicated read, and like many of the speakers who've talked before me, I've read this novel a few years back when I was in my college, and it's a very complicated read, which is very difficult to understand during the time, but a rereading of it now makes it more relevant and make it more understandable. And I think that's all I can say. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me to speak here. I'm not cut out to speak on fiction, especially really classic fiction like Catch-22, but Amy said, I should be there as the oddball in that very learned group. So I am the oddball because I am not a fiction writer, and I have written only books on branding and consumer behavior and stuff like that. Very, very boring stuff. Okay. So let me give a little bit of flashback and tell you, I've read the book. I've read the book probably when I was in IIT. And in those days in IIT, we used to read a lot of things nothing to do with engineering. One of them was Catch-22. And I remember smoke-filled room discussion going on saying, what is he trying to say? And we could not figure out. But, a few days ago, I was thinking, what are the other book which I read during that time, which also sounded similar? And through sheer memory, I discovered it was, Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know anyone here has read that book. Again, it's a very satirical view about war, which is what, Catch-22 is. And then I decided to do a bit of search and say, look, what was that period when all these books came out? And that Catch-22 came out in 1961, Slaughterhouse-5 in 1969, Kill a Mockingbird 1960, Clockwork Orange, again, very macabre book and also a crazy movie. I don't know how many of you have read Clockwork Orange, anyone here? Right? Yeah. Okay, 1962, Anthony Burgess, right? And of course, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Tom Wolfe and of course, MASH. So, what do I want to say about this book? I think you should read it. Like I think the previous reader said, you should suffer it, to know a little bit of what goes on in a soldier's life. Whom does he hate more? Does he hate his commanding officer more? Or does he hate the enemy more? What does he do to escape, all this great thing about war and glory, but in reality, in the trenches, what does he go through? What is the fear he has? And I think it's amazing the way he's brought it out in a pretty goofy, loony manner. There are so many loony characters. We heard from other speakers who kind of talk at cross purposes and having lobster in the officer's tent and stuff like that, pretty weird. But I suppose some of those things happened because Joseph Heller was in World War II. He was posted in a similar place, and probably some of it was based on what he really experienced. So all I can say is that I think it's a great read. It's difficult to read. It's all the characters sound a little bit off kilter, a little bit crazy. But the phrase catch-22, I tried searching and look, all of us, people who have not even heard of the book, use the phrase catch-22. It's a catch-22 situation. Now, in reality, catch-22 was coined by Joseph Heller. In fact, I think he was thinking of calling it catch-19. And then Leon Uris published a book called, again, a great author, glorifying war. Leon Uris is exactly the 180 degrees from Joseph Heller. He wrote a book called Milo 19, Milo 18? Milo 19. And so therefore, Joseph Heller apparently, with much regret, decided to call it, catch-22, and that's part of folklore today. People use catch-22 without even realizing that it's the name of a book, which is anti-war kind of a book, but we use it all the time. So today, a few hours ago, I tweeted saying, look, are there other books like this which have become catchphrases, which you don't even know that actually it comes from a book, and I don't know, I don't know anyone here can remember anything of that. And just for those of you, one more minute. Just for those of you who want an easier version of getting into this book, I would strongly recommend watch the MASH series on Disney+. It's a 5-part, or I think 5 or 6-part series, and it stars George Clooney. So what more can you ask for? Okay. But not as your Sarian. You'll have to figure out what role he plays. But yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you for coming. I'll start by saying that, like Mr. Pereira, I also read Catch-22 twice. When I was younger, I read it with the impatience of a young person who has just discovered the world of books. And I think I pretty much rushed through it, probably didn't even understand so much. Laughed at the goofy parts, loony parts. Found it as ridiculous, as it's supposed to be. And then I got that as a gift from my in-laws when I got married. Now, at that point of time, that became quite an imperative that I should read it, because I married into a family of acclaimed writers, and my brief was that finish the book in 1 month and then we will have a discussion. So, yeah, you can understand the pressure on a new bride. But anyway, I did, that, under a lot of pressure, I did read that book. And of course, I read that book, I revisited the book a few weeks back. What really amazes me about the book is that at every stage in my life when I've read the book has presented a new story to me. I think, in keeping with the life stage that I was in. So, when I revisited the book a few weeks back, I read it in the context of a world that has become as ridiculous as the world described in Heller's anti-war classic. It's ridiculous, arbitrary, drunk on power. The book has no heroes, and we don't either, not anymore. This world we live in today is inhabited by clay people, much like the characters in the book. We are all fallible, gullible, cunning, clueless, centered on the self. The ridiculousness of war is the central theme of the book. But to me, it is not just a commentary on the ridiculousness of war or the men who command the actions of the war. It is about the ridiculousness of authority in general. I'm sure, like all of you must have noticed that authority in today's world, the world we inhabit today, has come to mean authoritarian. And you will face it everywhere. We face it in the workplace, we face it in schools and colleges, it's there in governance, it's there in lawmaking, it's everywhere. We are all sort of drunk on power. Our inner dictators are all out. I mean, let me just give you a very quick example. Nowadays, most of us live in high-rise buildings. And have you ever noticed how dictators the RWAs are? Like, they will ask you to do something, and it's like, there have been often, conversations I've had with them, and I've actually asked them, do you really think you are a country within a country, or that, you are actually the president of the country, or just the society? So I think, it's a reflection of the times that we are living in. We have created these small islands of power, power dynamics. And we just, it just goes down, 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 to the poor and the marginalized. So in the book, the colonels and generals pull ranks and their subordinates suffer. That's more or less, throughout the book. What do we see in our daily lives? In our daily lives, similar power dynamics are playing out between the rich and the poor, between employers and employees, between governments and the people, between minorities and majorities. Also, at a time, I think, someone mentioned this, that there are three sides to a war, the winners, losers, and then, how we see war as. But I think, there's a fourth dimension to war, which are the soldiers, who are on the ground actually fighting the war, not the colonels or the generals. And at a time, we live in times, when, soldiers have become a tool to whet nationalistic fervor. It's a great book to understand the realities of a soldier's life. Because, I think, throughout the book, what always, strikes me, and it strikes right to my heart, is how helpless the soldiers are. The ones, who are up there in airplanes, the ones, who are on the ground, the ones, it's actually, their lives, which is at stake there. But, they have no power over their destiny. So those soldiers who take part in combat, who go on missions at great personal risks, Yozarian's dilemma, his pathos, his cruelty, his humanity, his pain and suffering, wanting to do good, the trauma of witnessing his friends die, retreating to the hospital over and over again to avoid flying missions, or wanting to leave the war because of his fear of dying on a mission, are all very real. It is more real than the stories of bravado and courage that the army press releases routinely churn out. So when I read Catch-22 today, characters like Colonel Cathcart or General Driddle don't seem that unreal or unrealistic to me anymore. They're not even exaggerated, because I remember thinking that these characters are very exaggerated at one point of time. The over-the-top, they are over-the-top, buffoon-like characters, full of self-importance. They actually hold a mirror to the world we live in and the people we have become. I'll just end with a short quote from the book, because, that quote has really stayed with me. As the chaplain realizes at one point in the book, it was almost no trick at all, he saw, to turn vice into virtue and slander into truth, impotence into abstinence, arrogance into humility, plunder into philanthropy, thievery into honor, blasphemy into wisdom, brutality into patriotism, and sadism into justice. Anybody could do it. It required no brains at all. It merely required no character. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry. I automatically have a very loud voice, sorry. As an amateur virgin Tata Lit Live speaker, I'd be crazy to speak in a room full of fans and sane if I don't. But I am sane. I don't think so. I think I'm crazy. The Catch-22 lies here. I don't know if I'm sane or crazy. Doing the play Catch-22, that in itself was a revelation. How did it come to me is another story. I was 10 years old. I walk into a room where my sister was watching a film, age 10. Videos had just come out, Catch-22 was on. I walk in to see Alan Arkin's naked bum. It left a lasting impression, very lasting. And I went on to see a movie of which I understood not a single word, not a single scene, but it left a feeling. And that feeling is, it left an emotion actually. And about a year after that, or 2 years after that, I see a tattered book, a copy in my sister's room. Catch-22, half the pages are missing. I said, oh gosh, this looks so familiar. And I didn't even remember the movie at that time. And suddenly I opened the book, and the page which fell out was a scene between Snowden and Yossarian, where Snowden is dying in the airplane, and all he says, it's cold, I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm cold. And he says it in many different ways. And the emotion I felt at age 13 reading one page of Catch-22 is again what stayed with me. I have picked up this book again 30 years later, and I got a play in my hand from a colleague. And he said, look, I have found the play Catch-22. I said, holy shit, I didn't even know there's a play. Heller outdid himself. He made it completely stark. The entire book and the play, they are the same, but they are not, which is Joseph Heller in a line. And if you read the play and you read the book, you feel the same. That's what's beautiful. You feel exactly the same. My Guruji, Pandit Satyadev Dubey, was known as the man you love to hate. And this book is the kind of book you love to hate because you've got to go back and try and read each line again. For example, I'd rather die than be killed. What is Yossarian trying to say? Nurse Duckett, a person who works in the hospital where he keeps going to, says, am I the only girl you ever loved? And Yossarian says, no. And she says, I'm so glad. So these are lines which, they have a lot of meaning. It's wartime. There's no time for love, there's no time for sex, there's no time for guilt. You do what you need to do, the moment is all you have. And Yossarian slowly realizing this, the protagonist, the way he becomes completely helpless, the hero, and he decides to go to the other side where his conscience says that, okay, I am now going to turn over and decide not to be the good guy anymore. And the minute he does that, another character takes over as guilt, which is Nate Lee's Haw. All the women in this particular play are symbols: sex, love, guilt, and many more things. There is a scene in the play and in the book where this very sweet Italian family comes from New York to see the dying son on this little island. And they say he looks terrible. And the brother, the son, the father's son says, yes, he's dying, but the person who's impersonating their son is Yossarian, and he's bandaged up. And the father, mother, and the brother, they all know that this is not their family, this is not their relative, but they want to live under the impression that the son is still alive. There's such pathos. The war itself is just pathos. And the feeling it leaves with you, this particular book, this novel, the movie, the play, is just irreverence. I love the irreverence. I mean, if we start taking ourselves so seriously, I mean, war will break out in this room. I think this book is trying to tell us not to take ourselves so seriously. The absurdity of war, I think Joseph Heller, he flew 60 missions, and I think he's borrowed completely from his experience in war and come to the point where he had to write the book. There was no other way to go through and work through his stress. And I think that's the beauty. And there's one more thing. He does not like Colonel Cathcart. He's the antagonist in the entire novel or the play. But you know what? At the end of the book, I actually feel sorry for Colonel Cathcart. It's such a weird feeling to feel for the person who's the biggest villain in the whole piece. And yeah, if you want to see more, and I don't know if you'd like to watch it, my play is running at NCPA another week. Please do come, and thank you so much for letting me share the podium with these wonderful speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and everybody at the festival for having me. Thank you, Q. And we miss Anil Dharkar, we miss Shashi. It's almost as though they're in one of these rows. I have to say that this has been one of the most polite ones as far as Book in Focus is concerned. In past editions, we've had people say, Midnight's Children, Rushdie's written trash. And we've had people say not very vibrant things about A Suitable Boy. We've also had people say wonderful things about those books, and of course George Orwell's 1984, but extremely well-behaved were Trishla and Nilanjana and Ambi and Hannah. So thank you very much for it. There is no discounting that Hella's written one hell of a book. The only parallel I can draw is to the world of music, which is such an inseparable part of my life as a radio presenter. Jim Morrison was lead vocalist to the band The Doors. The jury is out on him. Lots of people say he was a drunken, raving lunatic. The others say that he was a divine poet. So, and that's the beauty of literature, isn't it? I mean, we can look upon a work of literature in so many different ways and react to it differently at different stages of our lives. You take The Fountainhead, for example. You would think Dominique was a villainess if you read it at some stage of your life, and you would think she was divine and an angel at some other stage of your life, which is exactly what Yossarian and the other characters here are viewed upon by the reading public, which is you and I. So I'm going to actually start with asking some pointed questions to some of the speakers here, and then we'll just open the house and you guys can just raise your hand. If you want to ask a question of the speakers, you ask the speakers, or you want to say something, you just say it. It's almost as it were a book club by a fireplace, or the Mumbai version of a fireplace, or let's say a living room chat. That's what you want this to be. Jaswant, wonderful knowing your views. You said that you read it 20 years ago, and you said it's a wonderful parallel with corruption in real life. And I thought that was a very, very, very valid point that you made. But the question I want to ask you is, if the characters were not called as absurdly as they were called, Milo, Mindbender, and the major, would it have made it more believable for you? Does the absurdity stem from the titling of the characters, is what I want to ask you.
Hello? Yes. As the book is, basically 20 years ago, I gave up the book actually. So I mean, I didn't read it twice, I just read it once. But the absurdity of the characters actually makes me believe that they are real. And at the same time makes me believe that they cannot be real. I mean, that's the feeling that it brings out in me. And I don't know how to resolve it actually. And that's
yeah, so that's why I'm asking you, if they were named any differently, would it have helped? If they were just called a Jim or a Milo, as opposed to having these really contorted surnames, would it have helped? Is my question.
Probably it wouldn't have been so conflicting if they were real names.
Fair enough. Christian, wonderful views. We're very happy to hear your views. Why do we feel sympathetic towards Yossarian is a very big question. He doesn't act heroically. But somewhere along the line, halfway through the book, quarter way through the book, you start feeling waves of sympathy towards Yossarian. You mentioned yourself that at some point he started impressing you. So my question to you is, what are those characters that Hella imbued in him that you really felt spoke to you?
Good afternoon. So like I said, it was only halfway through the book that I actually started feeling sympathy for him. Because then I started realizing that he had to do a most difficult decision in his life. And he had no choice. Like, supposing you and I were asked to fight in a war, and we have to keep fighting. It's either we fight, face prison, and I'm sorry I'm going on a tangent here, but how many of us would be actually brave to go and fight? I'm sure if I was in his position, I would probably make various excuses to go to the hospital and not fight, because I don't have that quality of bravery in me. But at the same time, when he decides not to fight any longer, and he's given a situation, he can, what I would probably do, I would agree in that deal. Won't be fair to everyone, but I'm safe. That's all that matters to me. But the fact that he actually decides not to do that, and he chooses, he carves a way out by fleeing to Sweden, That really impressed me.
Okay. Character traits that Hella imbued in Yusarian, which made him what he is. Ayush, I love the make lemonade when life gives you lemon bit. Do you think Catch-22 is more comedy than tragedy or vice versa? A lot of people struggle to kind of say whether it's a comedy, whether it's a tragedy. What is it to you?
To me, it's pure comedy. I mean...
Sorry, where are you? Just raised? Yeah.
It's pure comedy to me.
It's pure comedy.
I didn't live through that war, so I don't really want to put myself in that situation where I want to feel bad for the characters who live there. I just wanted to really enjoy the dialogue, and I think that's why I went back to it another time. But I do admire Joseph Heller. I didn't know that he actually fought in the war.
He was a bombardier himself.
Yeah, so
which is why it's quite fascinating that he would write his principal character being a bombardier.
Uh-huh.
So to you, you say it's a comedy.
Yeah, I like to perceive it as a comedy, even though it probably wasn't written through that
because
lens.
if you look at it, there's a lot of pain and pathos, especially scenes when, they've won back Bologna and they've won back Rome.
Yeah.
And, some of those scenes are pretty tragic, especially when some of the fighter pilots lose their lives. But you viewed it through a comedy lens, is what you're saying.
I feel like if Joseph Heller had to really write a true comedy, he'd be one of the best comedy writers around, so...
Hannah, you said it was complex and frightening to interpret. I need to understand what you feel about his writing as far as women characters are concerned. He has drawn flack, Joseph Heller, in the past for disrespecting women characters. How do you feel about that as a woman? Or would you, like Ayush has just done, view everything through a comedy lens? Can you roll a microphone to Hannah, please? Yeah, we'll need you here because we're entering the phase where we need people with microphones. Thank you.
Yes, I think when it comes to the women characters, I don't think we are in a position to really judge Heller because I think as my friends over here have mentioned, we have to look at the context as it was a time of war. And, it was a time when people do all sorts of things. People, have an attitude and all kinds of attitude towards certain things. So we can say that, war in any circumstance or in any context is a time when people don't think clearly. So I think we have to allow Joseph Heller to be, in that context of the characters in that war setting where, even his perspective and his attitude towards women has to be kind of, it's just that we have to cut him some slack, is what I think, yeah.
Fair enough. So you're saying we have to look at the situation more than the words that he uses.
Yes.
Because some of those portions are pretty disrespectful. I mean, for those of you who haven't read the book, there is a portion when the Allies win back cities from the Axis forces, and entire squadrons and battalions go into cities and take over apartment complexes. And there's a lot of debauchery going on there. And women are spoken of in ways which are not very complimentary. But like Hannah said, you've got to look at it within the context of how disturbed everybody was. There was a survival instinct. Even, people pushed into the commercial sex work trade because of the situation, because of the scarcity of food and water and this war situation that was there. Thank you very much, Hannah. Ambi sir, I love that you said goofy, loony characters. The book is non-chronological in structure. As a writer, I want to understand from you, does that create a different effect for you? Do you think a more cohesive structure would have worked, or would you have said a more cohesive structure would have weakened the book's literary impact? Because it's random and really random.
Yeah, so let me stand up, and I want to look at the audience, so I'll just stand up, right? So, thanks for asking that. The book kind of jumps from, time to time, right? It keeps jumping around. I think the first 50 pages are pretty difficult to read because he's already jumped, twice or thrice. And then after that, you get into the rhythm that, you're going to be jumping forward, backward. And I think that adds to the loopiness of the book. If you write a chronological stuff, he was in fact, the TV series actually starts with the chapter 14 of the book, where, George Clooney comes as the trainer who trains people, the soldiers, to walk 7 inches and 4 inches apart. So it's there in the book, it's there in the series, it's pretty funny. But that's not the beginning of the book, right? It comes somewhere in the middle of the book. The series, they've started it differently. The book, he jumps up, forward, backward, and I think that adds to the zaniness. I mean, of course, there is a lot of, sad stuff happening there, killing, etc., etc. But the zaniness of the book is this jumping, suddenly, forward, and suddenly go back, flashback. And I think he does it well, and that's why, all of us like the book. You may hate it in parts, but we also like it, and I think it adds to the charm of the book. It's difficult to do as a writer, and you'll agree that it's easier to write a chronological thing than moving one to the other. But a lot of good authors do tend to start a story in 4 places. 4 different characters, and then you finally bring them together at some point. That's also another story writing technique where you don't follow one character, but you're actually following 4 characters. But in this case, he's also moving in time. That I think adds to the fun of the book, I think. Yeah, thanks.
For those of you who didn't know, Hella spent 8 years writing this book. And he's the kind of author who would write line 1 and the last line, the beginning line and the ending line, and send it to his publishing house. And the publishing house is obviously very supportive, waiting 8 years for one novel to come out. And part of the problem was that, because he was trying to look whether he can do a chronological structure. The publisher wanted a chronological structure, but then suddenly he said, let's just throw it out of the window. And even today, if you go online and you look at the purist view, the purist will always say, the literary impact has been thrown out through the door. There should have been a chronological way to do it. But it's the non-writers, more than the writers, who actually turn around and say, what the hell? I mean, we never went to university and learned whether there's a structure and how to go about writing these things. We're just viewing it as an audience.
Yeah, Hrishi, just to come in, I was wondering, why did you guys call me to, be a part of this session? And
no, but that's good. So I like it.
No.
I like that a writer himself.
I found a connection. I found a connection.
Yeah.
I found a connection, right? Joseph Heller, after he came out of the war, went and did his, graduate studies or whatever, and worked in advertising, right? He was an advertising executive in the Time magazine. So he said, that's the reason, these guys have called me. And he's very well educated, right? He was an advertising executive in Time, and he was working there for many years, and he was doing a day job, and like a lot of us, doing a day job and also writing on the side. And then, for those of you who don't know, Catch-22 was a colossal failure when it came out. It didn't sell. As a hardback, it didn't sell. But then later it got printed as a soft cover, and that's when the Vietnam War had happened, and that's when the sales took off. And in a sense, I read the book in 72, when this whole Vietnam War thing was also available in India, and we had all seen Woodstock movie, etc., etc. So there was a lot of angst around the bad thing about the war, and it kind of resonated with a lot of things, of that time. So yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, back to you.
Wonderful, yeah. Kwasa's sitting right in front of you. Him and you can have another one of those sessions on advertising and the impact of advertising. I'm sure Q has many, many stories to share, family stories to share about advertising. That's wonderful. Trishla, I mean, I'm always intrigued. I'm such a fan of the theatre, about how your theatre folk interprets literary, works on the stage. I know this was also written as a play, but nonetheless, were there challenges in interpreting it into a physical performance on stage? And if there were, I'd like you to talk about it, please.
Yeah, thanks, Hrishi. Doing it as a play, first of all, reading it as a play took me 2 years. You have to live with something. You can't just put it up. And it's through the process of rehearsal. And art evolves through exploration. So that's how it evolved. And the biggest challenge was not the play, it was the actors. In Bombay, to keep an actor with you for a long period of time is a challenge. And I love my actors, and my actors fortunately loved me back. So I now have a play. But the challenge was actually hearing the sur of the play, as you call it. The sur of the play was more the drum beat, the way war would sound to these characters being within a play, and at the same time being serious and not making a mockery of the lines. It is so difficult to interpret a line and say it completely wrong. So taking yourself extremely seriously but letting the humor come out, for me that was a challenge. And yes, I read the play and lived with it for close to 2 years, before I even thought of it as a production.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Nilanjana, I loved that you said there are islands of power. What really spoke to me about Catch-22 is it's not just the enemy, which is the enemy in the war, the rivalry within the ranks. And I'd like you to speak about that. I mean, it's quite interesting when you look at Yossarian and the feelings that he has towards Cathcart, which you briefly mentioned, and the dynamics of what's happening internally. Because these guys hate each other's guts. They would like to kill each other, even though, there's an enemy out there to be killed. So the rivalry within the ranks, and if that was of interest to you.
I think that this book, is, a lot of the things that, we have been talking about here today, and what you are, you've just asked me. I think the book is an impossible book because it was written in an impossible time. But, what I find so interesting is that it is still relevant today. It's a hard book to read. There are, before coming to this session, I was talking to a friend and I said, have you read the book? And she said, I've tried reading that book 5 times and I just can't complete it. So I think, it requires some commitment because, you need to identify. For me, I identified immediately with those power islands, and I'll just give you a very small example. It happened while I was reading the book, this time. So I live in a building, apartment complex, and so we have a plumber, and he keeps calling me saying that, there's some seepage from your flat to the, flat below, and can I come and check it out? So I say, yeah, okay. So, he comes once, he comes twice, he comes thrice, and he can't find the seepage. So the 4th time he calls me and says, can I come now? So I said, come, check. So he comes and he's very, just checking everything that he checks every time. Then he says, I got it. So I said, what? What's wrong? Tell me. And he's like, and he's showing me the grouting between the tiles, and he's like, here, we need to renew the grouting. And I started laughing. He started laughing as well because he is being sent back to my flat over and over again because he can't find anything. So at its 4th attempt, he came across that I need to give a solution. Doesn't matter how ridiculous the solution. The guy is complaining of seepage in his bedroom, but he has found that the grouting needs to be renewed in my bathroom. And both of us, we understood, what he was doing, and we started laughing, and I said, yes, please, why don't you just get this done? So, and, so that's what, really jumped out at me. And I think, this power dynamics, these small islands of power have come with our country becoming, more prosperous, the rise of the middle class. We have lots of money, and, we just kind of, create these small power structures, where we are the boss. If we are all prime ministers and presidents and, whoever is below us, it could be our domestic worker, it could be even our children, So I found that very interesting. And, this came to me when I read it this time, because, obviously I'm at a very different stage of life. Yeah. I'm 46. I have been a journalist for close to 22 years now. I'm also reading, the last time I read, I was a newbie journalist, so I still had lots of hope for this world, Today, I'm more cynical. Today I see a lot of things, like I go beyond the surface. And I think, I have never loved the book as much as I loved it, like this time. I wanted to just mention something, you asked Hannah if it's okay.
Sure.
So you asked her about the, like the women characters, and I was just thinking about this because, this is something, as a feminist writer, this struck me, like when I was reading the book. And I have been thinking about this, that, like how do I, sort of align myself, but I love the book, and then, I think, there's, when it comes to his women characters, there's a catch-22 there as well. From one angle, you can look at it as it was a different time. Nobody paid much credence to feminism or equality. Women were, lesser beings. So at one point, I think, Heller is also trying to, like portray that world. It was like he was not aware of, being disrespectful to his characters.
There is objectification, but what you're saying is he wasn't even aware of it.
He wasn't aware of it. And the second way to look at it, I think, is that war is ugly. War is ugly for women and girls. There's no doubt about it. So he's telling it like it is. He has been in the war himself. This is what he has seen. We often deny the price that women and girls pay, like when there's a time of crisis. It's a very well-known, like thing that people say, that women and girls suffer the most during times of crisis. And he is showing us that world. He's making it very funny. And, I think, there's a lot of pain he's trying to mask, like by making his characters, just really relaxed and, like buffoon-like characters. But I think, that masks a lot of pain. The pain of, witnessing a war from close quarters, that's all.
I think you're right, because there is a strategic point where he talks about a cleaning lady with a broom.
Right.
And he says that to survive, she had to put out a lot. I don't want to go into specifics, but you get the drift when I say she used to put out a lot.
Right.
But if you look at the deeper meaning of it, it really gives you the horrors and the pain and the pathos of war.
Absolutely.
That ladies, women and girls, to survive. And at the end of the day, Catch-22 is also the tale of survival. It's the tale of how Yossarian wants to survive and not die, which is why he makes excuses and runs to the hospital. It's a tale of how women as victims of war sometimes had to go through horrific things.
I mean, if you look at Nately's whore, I mean, she doesn't feel anything. Because that's her survival, That's how she's surviving the horrors that the war has dumped on her. And she has to survive. There is no other way. She doesn't know of any other way to survive.
So much as it is a treatise on the insanity of war, it also is about survival instinct. And all these characters go through their own trials and tribulations as far as survival is concerned. Okay, last 7 minutes. If you have anything to say about the book, please raise your hand. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Like I said, it's like a book club, so we're looking at any kind of opinions. Yes. Can you roll a mic, please? I think it's the fourth last row. Your name, and then you can start.
My name's Ishitwa. So I would like to talk about how Ambi sir brought up Vonnegut and Slaughterhouse-Five. So I think it's important to bring it up here as well, because, of course, Vonnegut and Heller were friends. Yep. They were friends because they shared a lot of horror that they had due to war. And, these stories, Slaughterhouse-Five and Catch-22, is similar in its non-chronological sort of setting. And the fact that nothing really good happens or nothing really bad happens in both of these books. They can't really sort of specify if it's a good thing that happened in the book or a bad thing that happened in the book. But I feel like there's a distinction between these, sort of anti-war books that came around this era and Catch-22. Because, stuff like All Quiet on the Western, which was older, of course, and take Slaughterhouse-Five, which I feel is more approachable for someone to get into reading anti-war stuff, where all these books are a sort of flat mirror to war, as in like they show it like it is. But this was brought up before as well, that Catch-22 tells it like it is. But I would feel that that's not true. Like, I would feel that Heller brings a sort of sitcom-like American crassness to the war thing that he saw. And I feel that that helps his cause. Like, it makes it sort of, like, it could be that that particular sitcom-like crassness makes it a pure comedy for someone else. But for me, that makes it all the more tragic.
Which is why I had asked the gentleman there whether he views it as a comedy and a tragedy or a tragedy. He said comedy. And you're saying in no uncertain terms that it's a tragedy for you. But that's a very interesting term he used, ladies and gentlemen. He said crass. And that is a term that is often been used for Catch-22, the way it's written. The coarseness of the language, the crass manner in which things have been put across. So he's not the first person on the planet to use that word for the book. It's interesting when you go online and you read reactions to the book. So thank you very much. What you've said made a lot of sense. The sitcom-like nature was put in there on purpose, and perhaps it was needed at the time. Anybody else, please? I think our next session starts at 4:30, right? Yeah. So we're pretty much at that mark. If you have anything to say, happy to have you speak. I'd like to actually quote a line from it. So you know that Yossarian's desire to escape combat duty is what a lot of the book is about. And Dr. Dhanika refutes that. Because Yossarian goes and says, you know, I'm one of the crazy ones. So put me away. I'm one of the sick ones. A concern for one's own safety in the face of dangers that were real and immediate is the process of a rational mind. So really, the insanity of war is there for all of us to see and hear in Catch-22. But maybe Yossarian was the only sane one in the entire book, because he had a survival instinct where he wanted to stay alive, which is more than what one can say about a lot of people who go through the horrors of war on the front line. So with that, if you don't have any further comments from me, Hrishi K, and these wonderful speakers, and our audience speakers, thank you very, very much. And please keep attending Tata Lit Live. See you back here for the next session and the years to come. Thank you very much. Cheers.